I've been trying something new to stop Scar from coming in on these. I love her. I love being around her. She's wonderful. But she's also disruptive. That's one thing I've learned about Scar, it's that she's disruptive. So, I bought something new a few days ago. We're gonna see if it works to leave this filming a little bit cleaner. Crossing our fingers.
Took you long enough.
Yeah, good thing you chose an easy spot.
Chapter 31. From the beginning, Blaze had been one of my best supports. He was always there, no matter where I was, no matter who else left. Blaze was there. He took me through the hardest times. He taught me traveling. And he was always there when I needed him. Until he disappeared in a flash of green. I screamed, running forward and sighing as I threw myself over the damaged tank, landing on my knees in the place where my steed had disappeared. Not burned away by a laser blast, but disappeared in a blast of traveling power. I felt desperately for the world that he had gone to, but there was no overlap of any kind. The world of becoming went silent as I turned and looked at the 4 Prophithians standing down the street. 3 of them held normal guns and protected the 4th, who held a massive green gun. He looked at me and shot. The green blast pulsing through the air as it made its way toward me. I held on to the world of becoming as the shot came. And I sired, ready to take that shot and go where Blaze had gone. The shot hit me, and a force like I'd never felt before ripped me from this world and shot me to another. My body arcing with pain as I came through the far side. In the shot, I'd completely lost hold of the world of becoming. There was no way to hold on, no way back, no gate, just sheer force rocketing someone to another world. I looked up, and there was no Blaze. He'd gone to some world completely unpredictable, which left me alone, kneeling on the deck of the of the Enterprise. Blaze was gone, somewhere on the infinite worlds, and I didn't know that I could get him back. No worry that I wouldn't be able to get back. I didn't have the presence of mind to think about that yet. Anyway, someone said, "Are you okay?" And I looked up to see a woman in blue. She looked human, but there was an understanding in her eyes that no others could have. I suddenly became aware of my surroundings, and she was the only one who could sense the anguish In my mind, the others just saw somebody appearing on the deck, and some had hands to their blasters. I pulled myself up, hand against the golden wall. Physically, I was fine, but I needed physical support for the mental agony that I was experiencing. I said, I'm fine, I'm sorry to... But I couldn't finish the thought. I had to get back to Blaze, somehow. I reached into my scabbard and I pulled out the gate that I had used to get to the world of becoming. That gate was still connected to the training grounds on Saramea, and I was still able to access it. Now it just led here. I disappeared through the gate and came out through the staging grounds, where some Prophithians had come through and they were fighting our reserves that we were keeping here. I wasn't able to get right back to where Blaze had been, and so I pulled out the gate that I'd used to bring Deathwing to the world of becoming, and sent myself through to where I had sent him. The ground here was cracked and shattered, the middle of a spider web, and magma began to ooze through places here, but the entire area was broken. There were broken bodies, broken equipment. I left it all behind as I pulled my broom out of the scabbard, replacing it with the gate, and I took off into the city of Mallat. My mind was strangely quiet as I raced back to where we had been. I had a vague idea, and destiny filled in the rest. And I came down, slamming down on the ground, after I had found the group of 4 who had preying on Sarameans and our people as they were preoccupied. I slammed down on the ground just as the group was firing on Gandalf, who was in a furious struggle with Voldemort. I came in between the wizards and the aliens just as the shot came, and siring, I tore the energy pulse in two, shredding it. The energy released into the air around and shattered the ground nearby, sending dust into the air. I stepped through the cloud of dust and faced the group of 4 who saw me again and shrank back, terrified at who I was. The Prophithian fired again, and I raised Talonthorn, absorbing the energy from the blast into the sword, transferring it into just energy. And the other Prophithians began to fire on me as well, and I absorbed those blasts as they turned and began to run. They only wish they could run from me. I ran to the first, ripping the gun from his arms. I sliced him in two, and turned toward the second, and incapacitated her without a thought. The third tried to fire on me, and I absorbed more blasts from the gun into Talonthorn, which held enough energy at this point that I was able to turn it toward the Prophithian and release a blast of my own, which took the Prophithian down. I didn't even turn to the fourth. He had a faulty gun, and siring out, I bent a piece of the gun which fractured and ruptured the energy, which exploded the gun, and I could feel the heat from here 50 feet away. I turned to the dropped gun that had taken my steed, and I gripped the gun in 2 hands, latent strength left over from Crimson, pure adrenaline, and the energy from Feather Life were enough that I barely had desire to rip the gun in 2. Inside was a crystal conglomerate, ISO that had been warped and twisted by the Prophithians. There was no gate here, simply a perversion of ISO. But through it I could feel all of the worlds around me. With this conglomerate I didn't need an anchor world. I could go, and I didn't know where Blaze had gone, but just the chance to find him was all that I was looking for. I sent myself into the next world and found myself in a golden room, coins littering the ground as plasma shot between the roof, or the ceiling and the floor as the ceiling rotated around me. No Blaze. I went on to the next world to see an icy landscape, the only landmark a wall of ice that rose hundreds of feet and extended to either side into the darkness. that was simply cold, simply dark. There was no light, no heat, no blaze. I went into the next world, where Prophithians fought Prophithians, blue on green. I heard a conductor roaring in the distance, deafeningly loud. It hurt the ears of the Zelans, who didn't have the protection and the control of the same Prophithians. No blaze. I went again, and again, and again, and came to a world where sudden pain filled my body, a pressure and a cold and a pain that I had never experienced before. Destiny told me that it was the pain and the pressure of an atmosphere, of a world far from its star, where there was no surface, simply raging storm. Destiny took command as my mind shut down, sending me back through the conglomerate to the world of becoming, where I collapsed on the ground, my fingers frozen over, as destiny pulled energy from the worlds around to heat my body, to push the gases from my lungs that had been forced in, ballooning my lungs. The cold dissipated, and he took over the nerve endings and all throughout my body, telling my body that I wasn't dying anymore. He numbed the pain and brought me back to life. But he could only numb me so much. And I was left trembling on the ground. If that was the world that Blaze had gone to, he was long gone. And if not that world, there were infinite other worlds like that. And even if they weren't that bad, he could have gone anywhere. And even if he'd come to a place that wasn't dangerous and deadly, there was no guarantee that he would ever find his way back to Saramea. I don't know how long I was on the ground there cradling the ISO. But vaguely I heard a voice say, "The Emperor!" And someone knelt down by my side and began to fire shots to the side. They weren't using a laser gun like I'd gotten used to, though. They used a gun with bullets that had to be reloaded every time. And the blasts were so loud they kind of brought me back to myself, and I looked up. Abraham Lincoln? He spared me a glance as he reloaded his gun and fired on another Prophithian. As he brought the gun to his shoulder, and his face wasn't as wrinkled as I had seen in photographs in history class. But he said, "You're not from Springfield. I worry about what you've heard." But he waved someone over, and a figure glided past with long feathery wings and a toga. He swung past and pulled something out of a pocket, singing into it and throwing it into a building, where it released a burst of electricity that incapacitated all the Prophithians there and took down supports of the building, dropping the building down and felling another group of Prophithians that was on top of the building. The figure landed down beside us and knelt at my side. And I said, "Anciano, what are you doing here? I thought you said your people would be fighting the Seers from trust." And he said, "My men can take care of that." He said, "Besides, we have no problem with that. They have no power against us except to call down lightning, and my men are trained to handle that." I wasn't sure how to take any of that, but he could tell that I was in pain. He asked what happened, and I couldn't say anything, but I'm sure the train of thought was deafening to him. And he sat me up as, Anciano and Abraham were enough to scare away the Prophithians nearby, but Abraham Lincoln still kept guard as Anciano checked me and helped me. And hearing my train of thought, he said, "You need to keep moving. Don't focus on this. until your people are safe. They need you. You'll be able to sleep better tonight if you just keep moving. But I didn't care about tonight. If I was gonna fight, I needed Blaze. I couldn't do it. I couldn't. And Anciano reached for my hand and held my finger that had Featherlife on it and began to sing into Featherlife. But he sang its old basis note, the basis note of its, or the full note of its old basis stone. And he hadn't realized that I'd gotten a new one since the old one ran out on Skynor. And I sang the new note for him. And I felt his abilities flood into my mind, and I could hear his thoughts and his feelings and his impressions. And he said the exact same thing again. Keep moving, your people need you. But as he thought it, I felt what he was saying, and I knew that it was true. I still didn't want to accept it, but it was easier to agree to, which was still hard for me. But Anciano said that's one of the good things about thoughtfulness. It's your understanding. And I don't know, hearing his thoughts, it was easier to hear past the terror that I felt at the thought of living without Blaze, but I thought to him, what's going to happen when Featherlife runs out and I don't have this same control over my thoughts anymore? And Anciano said, keep moving. That'll take care of it. I didn't know how he could be so sure. But steeled myself, I felt more stable like this, and was able to think past this wall in my mind enough to hear Abraham Lincoln's thoughts. I thought how crazy it was that he was on another world fighting aliens with an angel and a magic boy emperor. I couldn't help but smile at that. And Anciano said, you have what it takes. Keep going. And I thanked him. I pulled myself to my feet, the ISO conglomerate in my hand. And I hugged Anciano. I needed a hug if I was going to do what this took. And I knew that Ceremanes weren't used to that, but I needed it. I thanked him and turned to finish my part in this war. End of chapter 31.